Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the situation with Joe Biden and these theories about cognitive impairment. Specifically, does he have some type of dementia, or is he exhibiting early warning signs of dementia? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoy this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So, Joe Biden is a career politician who is running against Donald Trump for the presidency of the United States. Biden has a long history of gaffes. He has said a lot of things that don't make a lot of sense. But now there's this theory that this pattern of behavior actually represents a larger problem, namely dementia. So let's start with this question. What is dementia? Dementia is really a group of symptoms that affect one's ability to think, remember, and socialize. A number of disorders can actually cause dementia. The most common is Alzheimer's disease. Other common causes would be vascular dementia and Lewy body dementia. That's the disorder that affected Robin Williams. Most of the disorders that cause dementia are progressive, and usually the symptoms cannot be reversed, although sometimes they can be slowed down. About 14% of the population over the age of 71 has dementia. The risk of getting dementia doubles every 5 years, from the age of 60 to the age of 90. The symptoms of dementia, especially early on, are nonspecific, so they can point to a variety of disorders, or in some cases they can point to nothing. For example, if somebody has difficulty remembering names of people they've known a long time, that could indicate a problem, or it could really just be nothing. It could be normal forgetfulness. Here I'll cover some of the common symptoms of dementia. Memory problems really stand out, especially short-term recall. So if something is presented and somebody has trouble remembering that 7 seconds later, or 10 seconds later, 20 seconds, something like that, that's the short-term memory. If somebody has difficulty remembering the color of the house they live in, or the name of a neighbor that they've known for many years, that's long-term memory. Long-term memory can be impaired with dementia, but again, it's that short-term recall that is much more noticeable in terms of looking at symptoms that point to dementia. Next, we see difficulty concentrating, losing track of the topic, not understanding the point someone is trying to make. So we see a lot of difficulties like in conversations. Impaired judgment is a symptom, decreased problem-solving skills, getting lost when outside the house. Sometimes people also get lost in their own house. This is considered a more severe symptom. There could be speech problems, like when somebody talks in a way that is not concise, they go on longer than they need to, they don't really add any new ideas as they're talking. This is called circumlocution, right? When somebody uses a lot of words, but they don't really say anything. They use more words than are necessary, and they don't really ever seem to get to a point. Other symptoms include going off on tangents, being repetitious, having difficulty finding the right word. Confabulation. This is when somebody has gaps in their memory and their brain populates memories into those gaps. Now, these memories are from other events, so the stories that they tell don't make any sense. So, for example, somebody might be recalling a story of how they drove to a store and picked up an item and brought it back home, but they may have forgotten the drive there. So they confabulate and talk about how somebody picked them up and drove them over there, and they talked about different events. This could have never happened. This is a memory that's inserted that doesn't fit. So confabulation is considered a fairly severe symptom. We also see difficulties with reading comprehension, confusion, agitation, anxiety, paranoia, and hallucinations. There are many other symptoms I didn't cover, but these are really just the popular symptoms that seem to point toward dementia. One of the major difficulties when somebody's assessing themselves for dementia, like they're looking at themselves, looking at their own symptoms, is that many of the symptoms are nonspecific, as I mentioned, but also people may be more aware that they are being forgetful or having trouble concentrating and notice every time that they do it, making it seem like they're having this trouble all the time when the symptoms could be occasional and really mean nothing. An analogy to this phenomenon would be when working with people who have social anxiety disorder or panic disorder. It's not unusual at some point during the course of that disorder that they will believe they're having some type of cardiac event. Now, as a mental health counselor, of course, I refer people to their physician for anything medical. After they meet with the physician, they would come back and maybe say something like, there was a medical problem, but much of the time they would come back and say they were having anxiety symptoms, and those mirrored the symptoms of cardiac problems. So we see overlap there, really to a frightening degree. Tightness in the chest, pain in the arm, shortness of breath. It's really incredible how alike panic and anxiety can be to something like myocardial infarction. Confusion occurs because the symptoms are similar, but also because the person notices everything due to their anxiety. They notice all the sensations in their body. And again, they tend to aggregate the symptoms that point to what they're afraid of. So now moving back to dementia. If someone forgets the name of a friend they've known for many years, they might start to remember how they have forgotten other names recently. At the same time, they forget all the times they remembered something accurately, if that makes sense. What could be happening with Joe Biden in this situation is that all of these video clips of him making mistakes are put together. A lot of people watch them on places like YouTube, and they see all his mistakes in a row. So it seems like kind of an intense experience. It looks like there is something going on based on that concentrated information of one type. So people will look at that and say, well, there you go. He must have some type of problem. Nobody would act like this all the time. But that's really the problem. He's not acting like that all the time. These are selected video clips, which all tend to point in one direction. We're not seeing video clips, potentially hours of video, where he is not making many mistakes. Now, when looking at these video clips, we do see Biden does make a variety of errors. Let's just take a look at a few of them. He says things that don't make sense, like we choose science over fiction, we choose truth over facts. He says things that make him look like he has forgotten what he's doing. He said that he was the Democratic candidate for Senate, and when he was in New Hampshire, he started talking about how great Vermont was. At one speaking event, he became verbally aggressive with a union worker and threatened to take away his AR-14. Considering there is no such firearm, that would be an incredible feat. He called a person at one of his events a lying, dog-faced pony soldier and challenged him to a push-up and IQ test. He claims that that quote about the soldier came from John Wayne, but I haven't been able to find that. Even if it did come from some place like a movie that John Wayne was in, there are some things that really shouldn't be repeated no matter what the source was. It's not really a justification to say something just because it was mentioned in the past. He doesn't seem to understand that numbers mean something, like they can be used to count. For example, he said that 150 million Americans have been killed by guns since 2007. Just to put that in perspective, there are about 330 million people in the United States, which means that Biden believes that gun violence killed 45% of the U.S. population in 13 years. Between 70 and 85 million people died in World War II. So he believes that gun violence from 2007 killed about twice as many people as died in World War II. So this mistake looks like he just can't connect with numbers. These mistakes that Biden has made can be categorized in different ways: humorous, disturbing, confusing, perplexing, odd, bizarre. But the question becomes, do those behaviors really align with symptoms of dementia? It doesn't really look like they do. One of the things that many people don't understand about dementia is just how much it interferes with functioning. Biden seems to be functioning pretty well overall. He's having these isolated moments where he makes mistakes, but he knows where he is most of the time, and his disfluencies and lower cognitive processing speed are not really pronounced. I think it's also important to consider the circumstances that he's speaking under. When you're going from state to state, it's easy to forget where you are. He's under a tremendous amount of pressure. I think he realizes he only has one chance to become president. It's one thing to have symptoms at home under peaceful circumstances. That's not what's happening with Biden. Any shortcoming that he has is being noticed under that level of scrutiny. Biden is 77 at the time of making this video. Again, some cognitive slowdown would be expected. Biden has never been articulate. He has a long pattern of making these types of errors. When he was younger, he stuttered, and for many people, those symptoms don't ever fully go away. So there's a lot of factors that could explain what's going on, and I think many factors explain what's going on much better than something like dementia. Now, Biden really doesn't stand out as being particularly intelligent. I don't think he's unintelligent, but I find it ambitious and perhaps a bit presumptuous that he would challenge anybody to an IQ test. Combine perhaps an average level of intelligence with all the pressure and the normal effects of aging, and his behavior doesn't really seem that unusual. What seems to be happening with Biden is that he speaks before he thinks, or he's already thinking about something else as he finishes saying what he wanted to say. It's like he's just jamming all of his words together, getting stuck, and then derailed. Something else to consider is that many people believe his level of confidence exceeds his ability. If this is true, then again, what he's doing would make sense. He's talking about things that he doesn't understand, so of course his words aren't going to be logical. There are many people who believe Biden is manifesting early symptoms of dementia. About 55% of likely voters believe this, according to one poll. Manifesting symptoms is a lot different than having a disorder. If somebody comes in to see a counselor because they're having anxiety, what does this tell us about their diagnosis? The anxiety could be normative, or it could point to at least 20 or 30 different mental disorders. Many people have said the reason they believe that Biden has these early symptoms is because they had a relative who had dementia, and that relative did the exact same thing. This brings up two important points. Basing an assessment from a sample of one is not good science. And the second point, I doubt that all of these people's relatives were really doing the exact same thing. Were all their relatives really running for president? Environmental factors really do matter. The stress of running for president has to be different than what most people would experience on a daily basis. I've worked over the years with a lot of people who had dementia, and I've worked even more with family members who were supporting a parent or a grandparent with dementia. As far as I know, I don't recall any of them running for president, but there definitely was a difference between those who were under a lot of stress and those who were not. I think the biggest factor to consider here, though, with people kind of looking at their relatives and saying Biden's doing the same thing, is that many of the experiences with relatives happen when the dementia is moderate or severe. Early symptoms are not going to be the same. There's a significant difference. Dementia at the moderate level appears pronounced. It's fairly clear when somebody has it. It's only really confusing at the early level. So again, these comparisons are really tough. The logic of some of these comparisons can really be challenged effectively. And stepping back from all of this, as I mentioned, I don't know if Biden has dementia or not. That would be up to a clinician who is treating him. If we look at the limited evidence that's available, I don't think that evidence necessarily lines up with dementia. I think the problem for Biden is that from the point of view of trying to win the presidency, the perception is really all that matters. If people view him as impaired, that could affect the way they vote. On top of that, when Biden was asked if he took a test, like a test for cognitive symptoms, he essentially said, "Why would I do that?" And then he went on to this weird thing where he talked about it would be like asking somebody if they took a test for cocaine. I don't really know how those two can be compared, but I think moments like those really don't help Biden at all. So this brings me to my final point. One of the famous quotes from Joe Biden is the statement, "I am going to beat Joe Biden." Now, many people have said that he didn't say that. He instead said, "I am going to be Joe Biden." So the word be instead of the word beat. I watched that video about 20 or 25 times. It definitely sounded like the word beat to me, but I'm willing to believe he said the word be, because that would make more sense based on the context of that discussion. Either way, I thought it was funny that this quote became associated with him, because in a way that could really be a moment of genius if he did say it. If he loses the election, it will really be Joe Biden who beat him. Politics are unpredictable, though. Nobody knows what's going to happen in this election. I worry about elections like this because I feel like each party could do better with who they selected to run. It's like they just get married to this one candidate and there's no reconsideration. It's like they're all just standing around saying, well, I guess it's going to be this guy or whatever. I just think they should think harder, at least some of the time, but this is what we're facing for an election. I think this really goes back to my theory that most politicians aren't good or helpful in really almost any way, right? Like, I don't understand why somebody would want to be a politician. But that's where we are, coming up with this election, and I guess it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So those are my thoughts on this controversy around Joe Biden and the theory that he has dementia. Please put any thoughts or opinions in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.